MTV debuted on August 1st of 1981, and it forever changed the face of music. Let's talk about it. Hi guys, welcome back to Classic Guitar Rock. I wanted to talk about MTV. I was watching a concert the other night. It was a Whitesnake concert from 1983. And, you know, it got me thinking about MTV and how it changed things. And it's ironic that I'm on a video talking about how MTV forever changed the face of music, and MTV doesn't really exist. I mean, the network exists, but it ceased being relevant in about, I don't know, the late 90s when they got away from being a music channel. But when they were relevant, in the 80s mostly, MTV had a profound effect on all genres of popular music, but particularly classic rock, hard rock, metal groups like that. And there's a couple dynamics going on. Number one was, if you guys are old enough to remember, in the first few years that MTV was on, the music you saw and heard, okay, on MTV was very different than the music you heard on the radio. Okay? There was MTV music, there was radio music, and there wasn't, I mean, obviously there was some overlap, but man, there was still a ton of music you heard on the radio, and there were no videos, right? Michael Jackson, it was a big deal when he started putting videos on MTV, okay? When, you know, Beat It and Billie Jean, those were big deals because here was a massive mainstream artist who was coming on to MTV. And remember, one of the critiques of MTV in the early days was it was all white people. I mean, there was not a lot of diversity. A lot of white people, a lot of British people on MTV. And so when Michael Jackson made that jump to video, it was a big deal because here's a big mainstream African-American artist who's now coming to MTV. So that there was that angle. But just in general, there were some record companies that were not buying into this video thing. You know, they were kind of hesitant. So there were still artists that were big artists on the radio that you didn't see on MTV. And there were tons of artists on MTV that's the only place you ever saw them. Okay. Remember Adam Ant and Split Enz and a lot of those British groups that you'd never heard on the radio before, but all of a sudden they're on MTV because they had lots of videos. So we had this new medium that was embraced by some record companies, not embraced by others. But in the first few years, there was MTV music, there was mainstream radio music, and they were very different. And then over the next 3, 4, 5 years, by the mid to late 80s, well, it was just pretty much all the same, right? MTV music, their playlist was pretty much what you'd hear on a CHR, on a top 40 station, right? So in a way, that was kind of sad because the early days of MTV, you got exposed to some stuff that you wouldn't hear on mainstream radio, even hard rock stuff. You know, I remember seeing Def Leppard videos, you know, before Pyromania, you know, seeing On Through the Night videos from, even On Through the Night and from High and Dry, you know, and then all of a sudden when Pyromania came, that was the album made for MTV and they, you know, had all the videos, but it was just an interesting dynamic. And so why am I talking about this? Well, and I don't mean this to sound crude when I say this, but this is just the reality of it. MTV changed the requirements for artists because it was no longer good enough to just be a good artist. You had to have the right look. And that was unfortunate because there were a lot of talented groups and artists that didn't have the look. And they were not embraced by MTV, and their careers suffered. I talked in a video earlier about Christopher Cross. Christopher Cross, perfect example. This is a guy whose debut album won like 7 Grammy Awards. Song of the Year, Album of the Year. I mean, phenomenal album, phenomenal talent. And then he just kind of went away. And I think a lot of that was he looked like a normal guy. He looked like your neighbor. He didn't look like a model. Doesn't mean he's a bad person. It just meant for this new MTV model, it wasn't going to work. So as I'm watching this Whitesnake concert the other night with Mel Galley and I can't remember the other guy, but these 2 guitar players in Whitesnake at the time, great musicians, but they didn't look like MTV guys, okay? And it got me thinking, when Whitesnake broke big, the 87 album, what did they do? Well, Coverdale brings in, these guys were, don't get me wrong, great musicians, but they also were good-looking guys, right? He brings in Rudy Sarzo and Vivian Campbell and Adrian Vandenberg. He brings in some eye candy, right? So you got a whole group of good-looking dudes instead of just good musicians. They were good musicians that were also good-looking dudes. So it kind of changed what became important. And you think about some of these great bands that we've grown up loving that you never really saw on MTV. Kansas. Yeah, they had some videos, but the videos usually didn't show the band. Okay? Remember the video for Fire? Didn't even show the band, I don't think. It might have showed them in costumes or something. Think about bands like that. Blue Oyster Cult. Okay, these are all great bands, but they did not have the eye candy appeal that a lot of the other bands. Bon Jovi, again, good-looking guys. And I don't mean this as a disrespect to any of these bands, but the criteria became different with MTV. You couldn't just be a good band, you had to have the right look. And of course, then there was a lot of debate that came out around that time about other bands. Oh, the only reason they're popular is because they're good looking, right? Duran Duran. Okay. They're only popular because they're good looking. And to be honest, one of my guilty pleasures is Duran Duran. I like their music. I listen to them, right? But that was kind of the quintessential example people would give. Well, yeah, Duran Duran's only popular because they're good looking and the girls like them, So MTV did change. You go back to the 70s. I love the 70s. 70s may be my favorite decade of music. A lot of the bands that I really like listening to could not have made it in the 80s after MTV. Would not have happened. Okay? Jerry Rafferty, no way. You could not have had a Jerry Rafferty make it after MTV. I just don't believe it would have happened. Al Stewart, wouldn't have happened. A lot of these bands from the 70s, Atlantic Rhythm Section, great band with some great tunes, they would not have made it in the video age. Molly Hatchet, a lot of the Southern rock bands, right? If they were coming out in the 80s, I don't think they would have made it. Simply because they did not have the same visual appeal that a Bon Jovi had or that a Duran Duran had. Rightly or wrongly so. Am I crazy? What do you guys think? What are some great bands that would not have survived during the MTV era? Or maybe there are some great MTV bands that did have the video presence, right? But were also phenomenal musicians. I'm sure there's examples of that too. I'd love to hear in your comments. Anyways, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode of Classic Guitar Rock. Bye-bye.